Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. This is October, and as normally we have the theme, "It's okay to fall." It embraces the unavoidable condition we all face, but most importantly, it begs the question. At least recently, am I worth the time to improve? When we're thinking about our lives, and when we are struggling, working in the mental health field for almost 5 years. You see this a lot. There's a lot of internal barriers, and I think one of the books I used and writers I used to read during high school and college was Franz Kafka. And I love what he says here in the very beginning. He says, I was ashamed of myself when I realized that life was a costume party I attended with my real face." Today, obviously, when we think about it's okay to fall, it's on the surface, it's obviously understandable, but it can go a little deeper, especially with how things can be in the more how the storm, how we may face life internally, our negative thoughts may be pervasive. Eleanor Roosevelt says it this way: "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." So this month, obviously, dives into that a little bit more, and the hope is obviously everyone will find what may work. It's always a kind of holistic approach, but I ultimately hope that when I ask, "Am I worth the time to heal?" that we eventually get to the point, ongoing may that it be, but we can say yes. And today I have Patrick coming back to just share his insight, being a part of the conversation. It's okay to fall. Thank you so much, Patrick, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Robert. I'm looking forward to our conversation. I appreciate our last one, and I'm sure today will be just as good as our last time we talked.
I appreciate it. I know that it's always hard to match schedules, but I appreciate us that every guest that comes on. But I want to give a little disclaimer. If you are in the States, 988 is a suicide crisis lifeline. I do encourage you, wherever you are in the world, find help if you are feeling that things are getting, I guess, out of your control. Find that friend, that coworker, that person, your church, mosque, temple, wherever it is. Find that person you feel you could actually be real. Say, things are, I'm always the person who's everyone depends on, but I'm actually not doing that great, that kind of thing. So with that being said, I'm going to go right into it, Patrick. Wayne Dyer says it this way: "Self-worth comes from one thing, thinking that you are worthy." But on top of that, I want to have that out there while we also, there was this one quote from Tom, it was I think I had Mark Twain. I didn't mention it before. "The reward of conformity is everyone likes you but yourself." So it's kind of like that caveat. So I want to, when you see these two quotes together, what comes to mind? Anything you want to share, or anything that I haven't mentioned as we just start off this topic with "It's okay to fall," self-worth, and where do we go from here, and what do you see working? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think self-worth is one of those things where no matter who you are, you probably navigate it to some point, to some degree. It comes up for all of us, and certainly questioning, depending on kind of where our background is, or what our behaviors have been, or what we've struggled with. I mean, certainly there's different times that self-worth comes up, in the realm of shame. I hear a lot, I've heard a lot in my career about, shame versus guilt, and the idea that, shame is kind of who we feel we are, versus guilt is more about, we feel guilty for doing something that we know we did or should have done, or we've done against someone. So I think shame plays a large role in self-worth. And I like the quote says, that basically the idea that we have to give ourselves the understanding of what our worth is. And I really think that starts with understanding, especially from a Christian perspective, understanding who we are in Christ, and understanding that we've been bought by the death of Christ, in the sense that us becoming his has come at a great cost. And so I really think it starts kind of with understanding that we are already worthy in that sense. And then beyond that, our worth is not necessarily wrapped up in productivity. It's not necessarily wrapped up in efficiency. It's not wrapped up in perfection. it's really wrapped up in, I think really the resilience and the continuity of a person continuing the process of becoming the best version of who they are. And right, that's a version that, none of us have accomplished right yet. We're not going to ever be there as long as we're on this earth. We're going to always constantly be working toward that. So I think, self-worth is something that has to be valued by the individual, not only just because of the fact that it helps move you toward where you're going to be, but also because it helps you understand kind of where your place is in the regard of how important you really are in the whole vast universe. And to this Mark Twain quote, the reward for conformity is that everyone likes you but yourself. I mean, ultimately, conformity puts you in a position where you're against who you really are in that sense, right? Like, everybody else is going to accept you, or else is going to find, things they like about you, but you're going to feel like it's not true to you. And kind of back to your first quote, it's like going to the costume party. If you don't feel you're authentic, how can you really be able to be that true person that you are in relationship to the people that are around you? I think inauthenticity is something that people on every level navigate to some degree. And you were kind of mentioning, who are the people you can be closest to, who are the people you can be most authentic with. Those are the people that truly can see that person behind the mask, so to speak. I think those are the people who genuinely value us. And going back to the Christian perspective again, that sort of, Christ knows us on that level, and Jesus knows us on that level if we've surrendered our life to him. And so, he understands us in our most authentic, most, vulnerable places. And then who are the people behind that sort of start to, build those relationships with us that are okay and comfortable with who we are in those spaces. Those are big parts of that process, is trying to understand and test those relationships. And I say test in the sense that, understand where those people are in your life. Find those people that, that are if you haven't developed those relationships, find safe places to do that. I think a big part of one of the things I've navigated in my career is just seeing that people can be very isolated, whether they be therapists or whether they be clients you work with. People are vastly isolated a lot of the time. Social media and a lot of things, although they bring attention to us, they don't necessarily bring an authentic connection to us. So I think there's a space where a lot of that's kind of going on for folks, and something that kind of spoke to me from what those quotes were.
Yeah, I like how you say it's ongoing. Like, obviously, since this process is ongoing, but also that you mentioned briefly at the end a little about social media, and I feel that the only thing I have a problem with it is that if I have a problem with, let's say, a friend or a spouse or anything, it's so easy to be distracted. So it's almost like the old saying, if you miss 100% of the shots you don't try. If you don't learn anything from these social interpersonal connections, Absolutely. It can be it may make things a little bit overwhelming, but that's also with how we avoid stress. If we avoid stress or things that we know, if I know something stressful is coming up, I can kind of prepare my mind, make steps to. But if I don't, and it all happens, a lot of times cortisol just rushes in, and we feel overwhelmed. We may feel like we're having a panic attack at sometimes, but it's a preparation. And I feel that when I'm thinking about what Mark Twain says, there's this you mentioned the Christian standpoint. I feel that just something bigger than yourself. A lot of times we're just in our heads, and it can be one of the things that a lot of people ask me, well, when I got into the faith, a lot of times that what drew me wasn't all the promises. What drew me was that God, when I read it, he never changed, which was comforting with a world that always changes. So like in that concept, it was very helpful. And all other aspects is that, in the first 5 books, there's this one portion, I think Deuteronomy, that says that God has no edges. And I like that. I like that it wasn't like there was something bigger than myself. And it wasn't really about what drew me also was just how the parables and the relationships that were a lot of lessons. When you think of Solomon, I remember with the they wanted the baby that they're trying to, and then we'll cut them in half, and the real mother was obviously the one that no, you could take it. So it's very important that I feel the human condition, when we think about, it's been something we've been struggling ongoing. It's not nothing new, like you said. It's something that we I think another thing that you mentioned, I think core beliefs. If we do things that are against our core beliefs, it can really it can really just be very disruptive within ourselves when we're thinking about self-worth, because everyone else may like us, but we don't like ourselves, especially in that regard. So, but I think there's a more it just feels a little bit harder, and I think there's a lot of elements to actually get there. There's so much urgency, there's so much enoughness. I read a book, Travelocity, I think it was, just so much of this. I'm gonna be this delayed. I'm gonna be good when I do this, when I accomplish this, or I get this accolade or that accolade. I think a lot of it, the success, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I think sometimes it's just a byproduct of good decisions, sometimes good behaviors, being around people and friends. I always ask this question when I'm working with a client or something. If the environment's a big deal, obviously people that are around you, I may ask them, especially if they're in a toxic relationship or toxic friendships, I'm like, if something good happened to you, would they be happy for you? And that's a very good tell.
Yeah, that's a good barometer.
Yeah, so a lot of times we're not sure. So I want to I just feel like it. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, on that same note, I mean, I think, kind of part of it is understanding your purpose, understanding your bigger reason for being here, other than kind of just the day-to-day parts of life, and I think, you said there's a certain aspect of that where if you make, wise decisions and you put yourself in the best positions you can for yourself, think those things through, you tend to be in better positions overall to be more authentic and be more aware of it, because you're convicted based on what you think or what is who you really are. And I think that's something that takes self-discovery, and I think that's always changing to some degree. I mean, there is some consistency with it in the sense that you have kind of your foundational principles about yourself, but you learn more about who you are, I think, when you go through those trials and those tribulations and the things that basically go back to the statement of the month. It's okay to fall. You have to have those falls in order to be able to learn who you really authentically really are, I think. And it isn't something that happens once or twice. It happens kind of consistently, because there's successes and there's failures every day. There's not ever just a as much as I want to believe in my own self is that, we kind of say status quo, the reality is we never really do. We're always either growing closer to being the person we want to be or being further from the person that we need to be. So I think there's always that kind of push and pull of that.
Yeah, and I think in the beginning I said, am I worth the time to improve? Time is a big element too. Like we're rushed. I think about Albert Einstein, paraphrasing. He said, they kept saying, "Oh, how are you such a genius?" It's like, I'm not a genius. I just stay with the problem longer, and I feel a lot of us don't stay with the problem longer. And I feel that simplicity and purpose, as you mentioned before, is a huge part of are you allowed the time? I say this to myself even to today. Am I allowed the time to improve if I have a weak point? Am I allowed the time to self-improve? We talk about self-improvement. There's so many books on self-improvement, but I always wonder, like, all these books, are people feeling that they have the time to do any of these things that may be helpful for them? It's one of those. And one question that's been kind of haunting me: when did our needs and healing matter less than other opinions of ourselves? So why does it matter so much that we're better now, quicker for everyone else but ourselves? So I do feel there's an element of distraction that's pervasive that I never, like when I was growing up, we didn't have. So I feel that if you don't use it, you lose it, kind of thing. So it may seem worse, but at the same time, I do feel it does feel worse because some of it can be worse, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think distraction is a real big part of it. Certainly the idea that it's more important to present what we think other people want to see versus what's really authentic. I think there certainly is an aspect of that. I would also say, to this question, what needs and healing matter less, is that, healing is a lot more, well, I think difficult's one word, but I think you'd also say it's a lot messier than necessarily presenting what other people are expecting, right? So the being able to present what people are expecting really doesn't take as much understanding of self and really digging into some of those things that are really deep wounds for some people. Again, everybody has their own kind of sort of level of that, but it seems to me as a clinician, I've understood is that there's certainly aspects of people where, for person A, they may have a lot of deep work, and to them to dive into that means, discovering who they are in the present rather than necessarily going back and, trying to change anything, so to speak, like in the past. And then there's other people who, they need to go through and process what happened to them. They need to understand kind of what their experiences were, and that is healing for them in some ways. Sometimes it's about understanding what you're going to be in the future. So it just depends kind of on people's experiences there. But I do think that it's a lot easier to let other people see what you think that they want what you think that they want to see, rather than being open about, what you're, because I think also, how people respond to that, is a big part of that. People don't want to open up their wounds if they expect to be, and I don't even want to use the word rejected, because I think we've kind of come a little bit of a way as a society in general, at least in the Western culture, of kind of acknowledging that other people are hurting. It's the dismissal of that hurt. It's not necessarily the embracing of it. It's more of the, that's I'm sorry that happened to you, and now it's uncomfortable, and I kind of want to move from it. I'm open to hearing about it, but only to a certain degree. And I think that ruins the opportunity for authenticity, because you don't get a chance to really understand the person's experience, and you're not learning about that person and what they've dealt with. You're kind of you're opening the door and then kind of, okay, well, this is what you can see, and then closing it, and not really letting the person really into that space. So, and a lot of people just don't know how to do that. That's something that, we as a society don't do a great job of letting people learn how to listen. People want to talk and they want to communicate, but part of communicating, actually say 50% or more of our communicating, is listening and being able to hear what our people's experiences are, rather than showing them or having it demonstrated for them in that sense of what it looks like.
Yeah, I think of like Carl Jung, how he kind of, I'm paraphrasing that, loneliness is the inability to share what's important to you. Period. And if we're not communicating well, that's going to be very difficult. I'm working in the field, and probably you felt this in your practice. I'm stuffed with a problem that's too many moving parts. There's so many layers, and I'm just listening the whole time. I'm actually giving them bad news because I can't get something for them. I can't work miracle. And at the end of it, they thank me pervasively, because no one ever gave them the time to be heard. And like, and in that regards, I just I was also just reminded of how powerful that was. As being myself, person who suffered with mental health, I just remembered some of the hardest part was you go through the whole gambit and navigating through the whole mental health system, but then it's more the quiet, when you're kind of pushed to the side, when it's here you go again, when you feel that you're just a bother, you're just a burden for everyone and anything. You disassociate, because sometimes it's just easier that way, in the sense that you just don't want your feelings to attach closer, because that's deeper. One of the things I felt I spent a lot of time back then was trying to explain what I was going through. And I would say, and it's funny enough, now I'm working in this field, it's like 99.99%, I never felt like they understood. And the lesson I learned was I didn't have to. They could still be supportive. I have family members, people who love me, that are very supportive, but they don't have to understand me for me to be validated to get help. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's a lot of over explaining when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes it's trying to make sense of it while you're talking. At least for me, that's one of the things I know I experience, is that sometimes I'm problem solving while talking through it. I'm problem solving and making sense of it for myself. So sometimes I just need somebody to listen to that aspect of it, just to be able to hear myself kind of make sense of it. I know for a lot of people I've worked with that it seems like there's certain situations that they're looking for more things than what they've already experienced, because it doesn't seem like it's significant enough, or it isn't deep enough, or it isn't hurting enough. And sometimes it's like, this is just your experience, and that's the true for all of us. Everybody's on this sort of continuum, and some people have had more, severe case issues and more severe mental health problems. But then there's other people who have been human in that, and they've for them, that particular wound that they went through is not comparable to what anybody else ever gone through. And I think going back to kind of like you said, it's okay to fall, is, don't compare our wounds to anybody else's. It's sort of allowing ourselves to be in the space that we're in. And there's a quote that I've years ago saw somebody had a tattoo. It was to turn your wounds to wisdom. And I always think about that from the perspective of, my wound is unique to me, just like everybody else's is. And, what my experience has been, how am I turning that into my wisdom, so that I can be able to learn from that, and then also give back to other people who may have been through something similar, but probably not exactly.
Yeah. I think that getting that balance, it's really about that balance to understand that it is a process, and like what I was feeling, and you're right, it could have been but it just, looking back, it just felt so elongated. It felt like we always had to kind of validate that I'm not sick enough to be warranted time that this is frustrating. And it's interesting, later on, you're like, I could be angry at someone, I could feel hurt, and I could I could learn from it, whether I was if my expectations, but all that is learning. You learn about yourself, you learn about what barriers, what maybe triggering, or something that maybe exasperating or increasing the situation. So I just felt like it wasn't, I needed to have enough to be validated to feel that I can get the healing or attention. But unfortunately, I see this commonly in this aspect. But I just want to also mention, as we continue, I'm going to pause a little bit and have you share a little bit of how things are going with you. Anything that you feel willing to update. I know it's been a while since you've been on. I like to do this for my guests, but Metamorphosis, very depressing book for Franz Kafka. I don't know, I've been in this little Franz Kafka thing, but this book, Metamorphosis, is short-ish, but it's just also very telling. The illustration is so, I don't know. I just remember when it first turning into a bug, I was just like, what is this? But it was so descriptive and so well written. But this part really speaks to me. I cannot make you understand. I can't make anyone understand what is happening inside me. I can't even explain it to myself. It's just that struggle, that kind of struggle that someone is having when they're trying to see, am I worth the time to heal? This sounds great what you're saying, but am I worth it? But when we could get to the point where it's okay, when we know that we're human and we can make mistakes, we can be angry, we can work out, and we can have the pie in the face and say, hey, I learned from it. I'm sorry. I'm going to do better. I'm going to try to do better, not because I want to. And then trying to find those steps to that. So anyway, with that pausing, I want to give my guests, give a chance to just share what's been going on, Patrick. It's been a little bit of a while, but I'm so glad for you to come on and share your thoughts and everything.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I always like to reconnect with people, and when I get a chance to be on a second time, that's always a great honor. So I appreciate that. So since we last talked, I was probably closer to the beginning of my journey working with sexual addiction recovery. So I did that from 2020 to 2024. So I think when we did an episode, it might have been 2021 or 22. So at the end of 2024, I decided to kind of conclude my time there. I felt like I had accomplished everything that I could have accomplished, and it was just a situation where it was time for me to kind of move to the next level. And I decided to start my own coaching business for a little short period of time. It's called Bloomworks Concepts and Coaching. It was a project that really was kind of coming out of the idea that I saw mental health kind of changing, and I still think it is. But where that ended up coming to is that I was trying to work as a consultant for mental health practices and helping a lot of the owners in their cultures. I still think that's an important aspect of it, but one of the things I discovered in this journey of owning your own thing is that, you know, you might be convicted by it. You think it's important, but then when you actually get out there, you know, are people going to want your service? Are people going to find that to be interesting? Those kind of things. And so I tried that for basically most of this year. And maybe about a month and a half, 2 months ago, I decided to kind of shelve that project because it just wasn't yielding what I was thinking it was going to yield. So started looking back at getting back into the field, and I'm back as a therapist, you know, as a contractor. I'm working for a couple of different places in the area local to me. Mostly a general practitioner, but I'm really enjoying being back kind of in that space. And although the specialty aspect is really interesting, and it does yield some different kind of results working in that part of it, it also gets really redundant because you're working with a lot of the same kind of thing. Whereas general practitioner, you get a little more variety, and you kind of can open up your playbook a little more in that sense. So I think I've grown a ton as a therapist since then. And I see myself in a vastly different light as a therapist now, having been, you know, since we last chat. So I think there's been some really good things that have come out of that. And I think I've grown a lot as a person and as a therapist. And so I'm hoping that this next leg of it is going to just yield some stability, and hopefully, you know, getting to get into a community of people that I can work with, you know, for a longer term. I mean, that's kind of the thing is, you know, one of the things that was the downside throughout my career is I've moved around so much in different places. I've never really been able to establish a long-term caseload. So this is going to be really the first opportunity for me to do that. Obviously working in the specialty place kind of unique in that sense. You do a little bit of that, but so that's kind of more or less where I'm at. And so I've been kind of, you know, in that process of the journey, and you know, we'll see kind of where things are going. So far, it's looking positively, but you know, it's one of those things where, you know, mental health can always be something that gets thrown for a loop. It seems to happen all the time. So, but that's kind of where I'm at as far as since the last time we talked.
Okay, yeah. You know, I'm working in the field for almost 5 years, and I you know, whatever happens in the office, I love my program. Is just myself. I'm just out there, and what I love is just why I love what I do is just the clients. That's it. Just working with them directly. I don't. I appreciate, you know, it's just like minded. Just trying to, for me, a day in the office, just dealing with administrative stuff is just not my cup of tea. As much as I'm able to navigate through that, I just love just going deep into it, and I appreciate others who have the same kind of passion to help others. It's not, you know, you have to set those boundaries because you could get burnt out. There's a big burnout thing. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of things out there, but at the same time, it's very rewarding, and in the sense that just you, at least I felt that my talents and like I could hear from you is really just, you know, people, you know, the business of being helping people, because it is complicated out there. It's not easy. It's very easy to just kind of generalize, but it's not so. And a lot of times there's a lot more complex things. I just feel honored to help when I can and with who I can. So I just a ditto, I guess, in a way.
And I think I needed that too. There's been periods where, you know, I think I've gotten, you know, we talked earlier about expectations. I think there's certainly been times where, you know, I had expectations for myself and things I thought were going to be different about my experiences. And, you know, when you get down to it, you know, it's ultimately about helping people in their everyday life, no matter if that's something that you're doing through a screen or through a podcast or through a radio or whatever it might be, right? You're still touching people's lives. And that's ultimately what it's about. And I think for me, that was something kind of a bit of a return in that sense to some of those things. And that's what's helped me. You know, when you're working in a recovery program or you're working in a specialty space, you know, you spend so much time learning the process. You kind of lose sight of that whole idea of just kind of being with people every day in the session. So I think that's been something that has really kind of come back to me now since I've been back kind of in the, you know, more or less general part of the field. So I can appreciate what you just shared, because I think that's very true for me too. Yeah.
So continuing on, I again, thank you for coming on. I just want to, as we wind down, I just, you know, self-care is self-worth, how we see ourselves, that, I don't know, Jacob moment, if you think about one. I think it's a lot of times it's, I think those are the biggest barriers sometimes, is just ourselves. And I think Robert Hand says it this way, and it's not really just, it's just the better you feel about yourself, the less you feel you need to show off. And I say this because, with all the, things we are distracted in, is that calmness, that wholeness. It's not like I'm perfect. It's just that if I could say, you know what, I'm not very good at this right now, but I'm working on it. It's just, if you're able to get there and be a little bit more forgiving. Now, sorry, she says it this way: these mountains that you are carrying were only supposed to be climbed. So it's like, sometimes we try to do that double, be that extra martyr, and you see that I have a lot of pastor friends, and you see them kind of hold that, they try to do everything, juggle everything, and there's a lot of burnout in churches, people walking away from it, and not because their faith, it's just they're so burnt out. Right. They're just they feel that they have to save everyone and it's unfortunate. But again, I think when we think about self-worth, and it's being okay to not be okay, it's okay to fall, they're all intertwined. If we're able to say to ourselves that, I know I'm not where I like to be, and a lot of times we see clearer when we hit bottom or something really happens that's life event. But if we could remind ourselves, because we're poor historians, sometimes we're poor at remembering things. We were like, you know what, I'm not doing as well as I'd like, but hey, let's see how I can problem solve. What can I do today? And I find that, especially my time in the military, when I was during the 9/11, we had so many things going on. I felt the most peace when we were busy just working a problem. Like I found my comrades were just, that's where the camaraderie happened. We're all in this together. This plane is not going to be pushed out without us trying to solve this problem. So
common goal.
And I feel that sometime I like to get that kind of space. But I know we went all over the place, and I I just want to get to it's okay to fall. What would you like to say to anyone who's maybe listening or hearing this? Any I don't want to say advice. Anything that you want to say as we wrap things up, as we final thoughts regarding this topic, because we could go on and on and on, but I do feel that we touched on a lot of important parts. So as we wrap up, what would you like to say as the final thought?
Well, I think, and I might have shared this when I was on before, but one of the things I always end with a lot of the podcasts I've done or when I'm on with folks is that there's a Switchfoot lyric that says every breath is a second chance, and I always think about that lyric when you're talking about whether we're falling, whether we're being successful in walking. The reality is the fact that, as long as we're here, we have another opportunity to do something different in the next moment. And although it can feel like it's overwhelming, it's never going to be different. I think that we need to remember that our feelings are also very circumstantial. When things are going really well, we feel a certain way. When things are going really poorly, we feel a certain way. So we need to, in some ways, we'll be aware of the fact that our relationships and the things that are constant in our lives do fluctuate within sort of the space of our emotional temperature. But I think the other thing that goes with that as well is, kind of like you were saying, is that there's a common goal and understanding that, we ourselves cannot save everything that's around us, whether it be, relationships or whether it be ourselves or anything. Really, we can only do what we're able to do. And we have to leave all that other space for other people to do some of that too. It's not just our only sole responsibility. But we should do as much as we can do within our power that's going to keep us, balanced. I think that's something we talked about maybe the first time we talked. But the idea of every breath is a second chance is that it gives you a perspective of The things that right now is the only moment I have right now, and anything that's future and anything that's in the past are all in my mind. And how am I going to make that next step? It's going to be something for my reality, the next moment. And I think that's really where we need to sort of stay as much as we can in the here and now. And the less we're in our mind, the more likely it will appreciate kind of where we're at in the space, whether that's in challenging times or in times of of healing or in times of satisfaction. So I think those are some things that hopefully people can take away from.
Yeah, and I would, I can just speak from my own experience. Is that being a suicide survivor, I attempted before, and also just the idea that our minds can be our best friends or we're worst enemies. So sometimes I can feel, even to this day, things could be going well for me, and I feel like a piece of crap. I know this. I'm working through therapy. I've gone on to. I'm still going through some trauma therapy. So, with that being said, know yourself. Be a good historian, right? Like, do whatever you can to be like, hey, I remember this feeling. This is not who I am, even though I feels it. So there's incongruency that can be there. And what I've gotten better, I would say that even though there'll be a delayed kind of realization for me, then I'm like, okay, it's not as bad. But what I'm trying to describe for those as a final thought is that know yourself. That's what I have to kind of remember myself when I get stuck.
Yeah. So your feelings are not who you are.
Yeah, exactly. So I always tell people, and when I'm working with them, mental health is let's emphasize the health part, and also mental health just means that you need to live differently, whatever that looks like, and be okay with that, and if self-worth will help, not feel like external, because there's everything external is uncertain a lot of times outside of ourselves, that it won't be the one that says that okay, now it's unwinnable. Like you said, every breath is another chance. Like, we are still here. So I just encourage those who are listening, if you are struggling, get help now. Talk to someone. At least tell someone that you need help. Tell someone that you're struggling. If you feel like a burden, you feel like, get someone that you trust around you. I just want people to know that if you're feeling bad, those people that you feel comfortable with, that you can be honest with, be around them and ask them. That's all you need to do. That's my final thoughts as we wrap up. Thank you again so much for coming on and just sharing just having the conversation with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I always appreciate the opportunity, and it was a good conversation with you.
No problem. Remember to stay updated with Revive Ministry, reviveministryfl.com, and we're on on YouTube. Revive Ministry FL Podcast is our handle. This is goodbye. Revive Ministry, leaving this last quote from Carl Jung. It says, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself